I'll compensate you handsomely if you can solve even one. We'll see. I'll comply with your request. Rachel, a beautiful former classmate who later became Miss Tokyo University, put me to the test with 3 challenging riddles at the middle school reunion. She sneered at me with mockery, obviously criticizing me as someone who only completed middle school, as if she didn't like me even at school. It was clear from her expression that she didn't think I had any chance. However, I apologize. I've already figured them all out. What? Actually, She froze in shock when she heard the truth about me. What sort of prize should I request now? Taryn is my name. I'm a 30-year-old office worker who is completely normal. I've been back in my hometown for the first time in 15 years today. A feeling of nostalgia came in as I walked down streets that had seen significant transformation. Before I knew it, I had reached my target for the day. I haven't seen anyone since we graduated, so I suppose it's normal to feel a little anxious. I returned today because of a middle school reunion. It seems that several of the more gregarious classmates planned it, using the 15-year mark as justification. It implies that she had to be involved as well. Oh, she was Rachel, a classmate of mine in middle school. Rachel's father was the chief executive officer of a corporation that was so well known in the community that everyone knew who he was. Rachel, his daughter, was the epitome of the affluent girl. She was also intelligent, athletic, and incredibly beautiful. A lady so perfect that it was more difficult to find fault with her than to appreciate her strengths. I always thought she lived in a different universe and had nothing to do with me because of all those characteristics. For that reason, I never tried to engage with her. However, I had been perplexed by 2 aspects of Rachel since middle school. To start, what made her go to the same school as me? I attended a normal public middle school with no notable prestige or entrance examinations. It was strange that someone like Rachel would go to such a school, considering her stellar grades and the prestige of her family. Second, why was she so unrelenting in her criticism of me? It wasn't merely lighthearted banter. How do you even manage to score that low? She would ask scathingly. You should teach me the secret, or you're weak in addition to being a lousy student. How pitiful. She would deliberately give challenging questions that I was unable to answer, then make fun of me when I was unable to do so. However, oddly, this always occurred when no one else was around. Who knows, maybe that was her way of maintaining appearances. Furthermore, there were times when she would give me a gaze that was almost hateful. I could have just asked her why back then, but honestly, with someone so hostile, what good would it have done? Since this reunion was planned by the popular kids, it was almost certain Rachel would be there. With a mix of anxiety about her potential hostility and curiosity about her true intentions, I headed to the venue. When I stepped inside, over 20 people had already arrived, and the room was lively. Despite being a little early, this atmosphere feels nostalgic. Though I can't recognize anyone, as I scanned the room, a striking sight caught my attention. A woman surrounded by a crowd, exuding elegance that could rival a movie star. It took me a second to realize who she was, but watching her interact with the others quickly jogged my memory. Rachel, still the same. No, even more graceful now. Every move she makes feels like a scene from a drama. She still seems like someone from another world. As I thought this, Rachel noticed me. After excusing herself from the group, she approached me. Taryn, right? Long time no see. Yeah, it's been a while. Do you remember me? Rachel, right? Spotting me and coming over so suddenly. What's this about? You're as cold as ever, she said. Well, whatever. There's something I've wanted to ask you if we ever met again. Something to ask me. Yeah, near the end of middle school. Why did you suddenly stop coming to school? Hearing her question, memories from 15 years ago came rushing back to me. I didn't want to remember it, those bitter memories I had tried so hard to forget. The reason I stopped going to school near the end of middle school lay in both family circumstances and myself. My father ran a small diner in our town. It wasn't wildly successful, but it was beloved by the local regulars. Originally, my father ran the diner by himself, but when I was young, he remarried. After that, my father and my stepmother managed the business together. However, everything changed when a shopping mall opened nearby. Already struggling with declining customers, our diner was dealt a fatal blow. By the time I was in the 3rd year of middle school, my parents decided to close the diner and move back to the countryside to help my grandparents with farming. My father explained that the mall's presence had made it impossible to keep the business afloat. But a few days after they decided to close the diner, I overheard a conversation between my parents that revealed the real reason. "Hey, are you sure about closing the diner? We still have loyal customers." "Yeah, I wish we didn't have to close. There are people who love our food." "Then why?" "But it's true that we're losing business. That mall will only get bigger, and when it does, we'll lose even more customers. Keeping the diner open just isn't realistic anymore. And besides, there's Taryn to think about. You're right, his episodes have been more frequent lately. I'd had a chronic condition since I was a kid. That said, it wasn't anything serious enough to require hospitalization. It was manageable as long as I took the proper medication. But by the time I reached my 3rd year of middle school, my symptoms had worsened, and I started missing school frequently. That's why moving to a more rural environment will be better. There's a good doctor there too. It's the right time to make this change. It's hard to say goodbye, but for Terrence's sake, it's the best choice. And so my family moved to the countryside right after I graduated middle school. By the end of the school year, my condition had deteriorated to the point where I stopped going to school altogether. It hit me hard when I realized I was the reason they had to close the diner. The guilt was unbearable. I couldn't bring myself to say anything to my parents, so I just cried under the covers, silently apologizing to them over and over. Because of my condition, I didn't go on to high school. I also had a younger brother at the time. He was only in his 1st year of middle school. I felt awful about uprooting him too and apologized constantly for dragging him into our move, but he never once complained. In fact, he went out of his way to help our parents with their work on his days off. Eventually, my brother started his own agricultural business to support the family, and now that my condition has mostly cleared up, I work there as one of his employees. That's why these memories aren't ones I like revisiting. After all the trouble I caused, I'd rather not dwell on this. I'll just dodge the question. Well, it was a mix of personal reasons. Nothing worth sharing, really. Huh. I see. I thought maybe you ran off somewhere to avoid me. So, which high school did you go to? I didn't go to high school. Oh, really? Talking to me when no one else is around and barely reacting to what I say. Some things never change, even after 15 years. To be honest, I didn't think you'd show up to the reunion. So in a way, I got lucky. What do you mean? I'm glad we got to meet again. Oh, looks like my friends are calling me. See you later. With a cold glance, Rachel briskly walked away after saying that. Glad we got to meet again. Her expression doesn't match her words, and she keeps asking me all these questions. What's she really thinking? Although Rachel's behavior bothered me, I decided it wasn't worth overthinking and chose to focus on enjoying the reunion. Fortunately, a few friends I was close to back in middle school were there, so I didn't have to spend the event as a lonely outcast. As we reminisced about old times, the conversation inevitably turned to Rachel. Apparently, she went to a prestigious high school, then got into the University of Tokyo. She even became Miss Tokyo University. Well, she was always smart, and her looks were never in question, so that's not really surprising. What is surprising, though, is how little her attitude toward me has changed. Not wanting to ruin the mood, I played along and nodded politely as they talked about her. After about 15 minutes of reminiscing about middle school stories, the group temporarily disbanded, and Rachel approached me again. "Hey, can you solve this?" With that, Rachel handed me 3 sheets of paper. Each one had some sort of problem written in English, German, and French. Here we go again, I thought. I'd hoped she'd grown out of this childish behavior. Back in middle school, she pulled stunts like this countless times. I couldn't tell if she was drunk on her own academic success or if she just enjoyed looking down on people less capable than herself. But every time, she challenged me with problems designed to be unsolvable for me. If I struggled or failed to solve them, the pattern was always the same. She'd mock and belittle me. As another unpleasant memory from those days flashed through my mind, Rachel smirked and spoke. "If you solve even one, I'll do whatever you want. Heck, I'll even give myself to you as a reward." Ridiculous. Her condescending attitude is way too obvious, I thought, letting out a sigh. Seeing that, Rachel's expression grew even more pleased. "Well, too hard for you to solve." "No, I've already solved them all. The answer to the English problem is 48 kilometers per hour. The German one is 1%, and the French one is the 25th page." "What? How?" "Don't get so flustered. Let me explain it all for you." The problem written in English described a boy driving a car from his house to a neighboring town and back. He traveled at a speed of 40 kilometers/h on the way there and 60 kilometers/h on the way back. The question was to calculate the average speed of the entire trip. You probably thought I'd just take 40 plus 60, divided by 2, and say the answer is 50 kilometers/a, didn't you? But the calculation is straightforward. Since we don't know the exact distance, let's assume the shortest common denominator, 120 kilometers, as the distance to the town. On the way there, it takes 120 fortieths, which equals 3 hours. On the way back, it's 120 sixtieths, which equals 2 hours. Now we have enough information. The total distance is 240 kilometers, and the total time is 5 hours. Divide the distance by the time, and you get 48 kilometers/h. Next up, the German problem. Another trick question, right? The problem written in German was a probability question. It described a virus that infects 1 in 10,000 people and a test that can detect the virus with 99% accuracy. The question was, if the test result indicates that someone is infected, what is the actual probability that they are indeed infected? This one's designed to make you think the answer is 99%, right? I could already picture you mocking me if I'd said that. You just need to think in concrete numbers. Let's assume a population of 1 million. If 1 in 10,000 people is infected, that means there are 100 infected individuals in this population. With the test being 99% accurate, 99 out of those 100 infected people will correctly test positive, while 1 will incorrectly test negative. The same logic applies in reverse. Among the 999,900 uninfected people, 1% or 99,999 will be mistakenly identified as positive. Got it so far? Oh yeah, so let's break it down. The total number of people who tested positive is 99 plus 99,999, which gives us 10,098. That's our denominator. Out of these, only 99 are actually infected. Now it's just a simple division, 99/10,098, which is roughly 0.01. So the actual probability is 1%, correct? Finally, the French one. You really went out of your way to make this one tedious. The last problem, written in French, was quite simple in concept. It described a book with 1 torn page. The sum of the page numbers of the remaining intact pages was 15,000. The question was, which page was torn from the book? There wasn't much information to go on, so I started by estimating the total number of pages. I'd use the handy formula for the sum of numbers from 1 to n, which is an equals 1/2 n plus 1. I set that 15,000 is approximately equal to 1/2 n plus 1. Solving for n, I got roughly 173.04 or 174 pages. Following so far? Yes? Then it's just a matter of plugging in the numbers. If the book has 173 pages, n equals 173, so the total page sum is 15,515. Thus, the sum of the torn page numbers is 15,515 to 15,000, which equals 51. Assume the torn page is x, with its reverse side being x plus 1. Solve x plus 1 equals 51, and you get x equals 25. Since pages are always printed as pairs, front and back, the torn pages are 25 and 26. So the answer is page 25. But what if the book had 174 pages? Didn't you consider that possibility? There's no need to. If the book had 174 pages, the torn pages would be 112 and 113, based on the same calculation. However, books are bound so that odd-numbered pages are on one side and even-numbered pages are on the other. If pages 112 and 113 were torn, it would mean 2 sheets were missing, which contradicts the problem. This kind of oversight wouldn't slip past me. After finishing my explanation, Rachel stood frozen, white-eyed, as though she couldn't believe I'd solved them all. She must have been planning to humiliate me after finding out I didn't go to high school. What a pointless, childish game. As I thought about this, Rachel finally collected herself and spoke. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't think you'd solve them so quickly. Did you go to college by any chance? Yeah, which one? Harvard. At that moment, I could tell not just Rachel, but everyone around us had started murmuring in shock. Well, I did tell them I didn't go to high school, so it's only natural they'd be a bit surprised. What followed was an onslaught of questions from everyone, far more than I'd anticipated. The reunion eventually ended in a flurry of activity. Though I was invited to the after-party, I declined because I had unfinished business to attend to. I stayed behind at the reunion venue, and so did Rachel. In fact, as the others left to head to the after-party, I intentionally stopped Rachel from leaving. The reason? To uncover the truth behind her attitude toward me. Once I confirmed we were alone, I turned to her and spoke. Do you remember what you said earlier? Huh. What was it about again? Don't play dumb. You were the one who said it. If I solved even one problem, you'd do whatever I asked. I have no idea what you're talking about. What a conveniently selective memory you've got. Hard to believe you graduated from Tokyo University. What did you just say? I'm just stating facts. I'll ask you one last time. Do you remember what you said earlier? With a deep sigh, Rachel finally responded. Yes, I remember. I didn't think you'd take it so seriously, but fine, do whatever you want. With that, she closed her eyes as if resigning herself to whatever was coming. You're misunderstanding something. It's not going to be anything like what you're imagining. Then what is it? Why did you stop me from leaving? It's simple. Why were you so insistent on pestering me, not just in middle school, but even today? At last, I asked the question that had been nagging at me for years. Rachel's taunting demeanor from earlier disappeared. She fell silent, refusing to answer. What are you going to say? You don't have a reason. Why does it even matter to you? Seeing that this was going nowhere, I decided to answer her question first. I explained why I'd stopped attending school. Family circumstances, the worsening of my chronic condition, and how the exacerbation of that condition was linked to harassment I'd experienced at school, thanks to you constantly picking on me in middle school. One of your so-called admirers among the upperclassmen decided to target me. That's when the daily harassment began. I continued my story. I explained how the harassment escalated day by day. On top of that, Rachel's persistent pestering wore me down mentally, little by little. Combined with the worsening of my chronic condition, I eventually reached the point where I couldn't bring myself to go to school anymore. That's everything. Now you should have enough context to explain your blatant hostility toward me. Your turn. Answer my question now. Ha ha. Before I could finish, Rachel suddenly burst into laughter as if she'd had some sort of epiphany. What's so funny? Have you lost your mind? Oh, I see now. Fine, I'll answer your question then. Rachel began to explain why she'd been so fixated on me. Her actions, she said, weren't out of admiration or anything positive. They stemmed from resentment. She revealed that her hostility toward me was motivated by revenge for something she believed I'd taken from her mother. I don't get it. That doesn't make any sense. I've never done anything like that. Shut up and listen. Rachel continued her story. One day, she saw her mother visiting my father's diner. The two of them were chatting so intimately that it was obvious their relationship wasn't just platonic. Soon after, Rachel discovered the shocking truth. Her mother had married my father. Well, things are getting complicated, I said. I didn't know much about my mother's past, but this is unexpected. I get why you kept pestering me now. You ruined my family, and that's all you have to say. But I guess your chronic illness worsening and keeping you from high school was just karma. Maybe that was divine punishment. With that, Rachel picked up her things and quickly left the venue. I understand the story now, but it doesn't sit right with me. The remarriage was my parents' decision, not mine. This so-called revenge of hers is entirely misplaced, I thought. As I mulled over the situation, I wandered through the now empty venue. So that's what she meant by, I'm glad we could meet again at the reunion. It seemed I'd been harboring resentment without even knowing it. Her saying, I ruined her family, didn't seem to make sense. Judging by how my parents seemed, it didn't look like it was some kind of home-wrecking situation. The whole thing felt tangled. Countless possibilities raced through my mind, but I knew that keeping it all to myself wouldn't help the situation move forward. I decided to head home, leaving the now empty venue behind. The sun had long set, and the lonely sound of cicadas echoed through the night as I made my way back. When I got home, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to talk to my parents about what Rachel had told me. So that's the story. I began. Seems like I've been on the receiving end of some misplaced resentment. That girl. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have noticed something was wrong. It's not your fault, Mom. Nobody could have anticipated something like this. It's partly my fault, too. I should have paid closer attention. I'm sorry. No need to apologize. That's not why I brought it up. But Rachel's story still sticks with me. Is what she said true? Oh, that. I was planning to tell you about it at some point, but there's a bit of a misunderstanding in her version. Yes, there's more to it. A misunderstanding. Yeah, let me explain. My parents then told me the truth. After hearing their side of the story, I lay back on the floor, staring at the ceiling. I guess I need to let Rachel know, don't I? I thought. I had a feeling this might lead to more trouble, but I couldn't just keep it to myself. So I decided to meet with Rachel and tell her the truth on another day. Having made the decision, the next challenge was that I didn't have her contact information. With the help of a middle school friend and some effort, I managed to set up a meeting with Rachel about a week later. A week later, I arrived at the cafe a bit early to pass the time, and soon I spotted Rachel approaching from a distance with an unmistakably irritated expression. Well, someone's in a bad mood today. Of course I am. Do you think I'd be thrilled to be called out by you? Wow, you really don't hold back, huh? Shut up. So, what's this about my misunderstanding at the reunion? You mentioned my father's remarriage. Afterward, I spoke with my parents, and it turns out the truth is a little different from what you think. What do you mean? Don't worry, I'll explain everything in order. I then relayed the story my parents had told me. The reason my father and Rachel's mother remarried was that Rachel's father had thrown her mother out of the house, leaving her with nowhere to go. My father did that. It's not a pleasant story, I know. Want me to stop? No, keep going. Noticing the change in her demeanor, I continued. Rachel's father had been obsessed with having a male heir to take over his business. When it was discovered that Rachel's mother was infertile, they struggled for years to have children. Eventually, after undergoing extensive fertility treatments, she became pregnant only to give birth to a girl. Her father, enraged that she hadn't produced a son, expelled Rachel's mother from the family. So, my mother disappeared because I was born? Rachel asked. There's no need to blame yourself. That's something entirely out of your control. I know, but still, do you want me to stop here? No, I want to hear everything. You don't look like you're holding up well, I said. The elegant, composed Rachel I saw at the reunion was nowhere to be found. But it's better for you to know the full story, even if it hurts, than to live with half-truths. All right, if you insist. Understanding Rachel's need for clarity, I shared everything my parents had told me without holding back. First, I explained that Rachel's father had never truly loved her mother. After their separation, he only took Rachel in for the sake of appearances. Her mother left penniless and wandering. Eventually, she met my father by chance, and the two remarried. Ironically, after their remarriage, they had a son, my younger brother, and their life has continued since then. That's it. As harsh as it is, that's the truth. That can't be true. Rachel cried, still unable to fully process the truth. She showed visible signs of distress. Of course, hearing this would be a shock. Anyone would be shaken to their core. If I were in her shoes, I might have passed out on the spot. Suddenly, Rachel stood up and began staggering toward the exit. Hey, what's wrong? Sorry, I just need to be alone for a bit. With that, Rachel quietly left the cafe. I always thought she lived in a completely different world, but even someone like her has struggles and pain. It's obvious when you think about it. But still, maybe the way she acted toward me in middle school was her way of avoiding the reality. Would things have been different if I talked to her properly back then? Not that it matters now. After reflecting for a moment, I finished my coffee and left the cafe. I wandered the neighborhood for a while, but I couldn't shake the image of Rachel's face after hearing the truth. I thought telling her the truth would give me some closure, but it just left a bad taste in my mouth. Unable to bring myself to return home, that night I decided to stay at a nearby hotel. After checking in at the front desk and entering my room, I noticed a message on my phone. To my surprise, it was from Rachel. The message said she had something she wanted to talk about and asked if we could meet somewhere soon. She didn't specify what she wanted to talk about. Maybe she's planning to get back at me. Judging by the tone, though, it seems like she sorted through her thoughts a bit. Either way, I've got no reason not to go. Curious about what she wanted to discuss, I arranged to meet Rachel again 2 days later. When the day came, I arrived early once more, relaxing with a cup of coffee. I noticed Rachel walking toward me from the entrance, looking slightly awkward and uneasy. She's really wearing her emotions on her sleeve again. Was she always this easy to read? I'd wondered. As soon as Rachel sat down, she bowed her head deeply toward me. I'm so sorry for all the terrible things I've done to you. Whoa, where's this coming from all of a sudden? After our last talk, I couldn't fully accept what you told me. Honestly, I thought it might be a lie, but after doing my own research, I found out everything you said was true. Of course it's true. I wouldn't make up something like that. I'm truly sorry I treated you so horribly, all because of my own selfish assumptions. Well, yeah, but if you're apologizing sincerely now, That's enough for me. We're taught in elementary school that when we do something wrong, we say sorry. Hearing that from you is enough. I'm not going to hold it against you anymore. You're really such a good person, after all the awful things I've done to you. That's in the past now. More importantly, what are you going to do from here? Now that you know the truth, are you still planning to stay in that house? No. Actually, I've decided to leave home, and I've already quit my father's company. Well, that sounds like a solid decision. Yeah, and again, I'm truly sorry. I know I don't deserve to be forgiven, but I just had to tell you directly. That's all I wanted to say. As Rachel stood to leave, I quickly called out to her. What? What is it? Oh, sorry. Sorry. There's something I want to talk to you about too. Something you want to talk about. You said you quit the company, right? Do you have another job lined up? Oh, no, not yet. Perfect timing then. Why don't you come work at my company? I could really use someone like you. What? Hearing my offer, Rachel froze, her expression a mixture of disbelief and confusion. This isn't about forgiving you for what you've done. It's just that, in a way, you're a victim too. You got caught up in the selfish actions of the adults around you, and it destroyed your sense of stability. That earns a bit of sympathy, that's all there is to it. So you don't have to decide right now, but think it over. Tears suddenly began streaming down Rachel's face as she quietly spoke. Honestly, how can you be so kind? Why? Why would you go out of your way for someone like me? You don't owe me anything. You're giving me way too much credit. I'm not some noble person. Thank you, but why me? Stop putting yourself down. It doesn't help. The reason is simple. I think you're talented. Isn't that enough? Yes, it is. I'll gratefully accept your offer. And so, Rachel began working at the company my brother and I had started together. It turned out my instincts were spot on. Rachel's work lived up to her Tokyo University credentials, and ever since she joined, our company's performance has skyrocketed. Around the same time, her father's company suffered a significant downturn. Rumor had it that Rachel's departure had dealt an even bigger blow to the company than anyone had anticipated. How ironic. The daughter he took in solely for appearances was the one propping up his company. If he'd paid more attention to those around him, things might have turned out differently. Then again, knowing him, he probably wouldn't have changed. Not that it matters to me anymore. Meanwhile, Rachel reconciled with her mother, and now she occasionally comes over to our house to share meals with us. As for my brother, while their blood relation made things a bit awkward at first, they've since grown to be close siblings. Just the other day, at Rachel's request for dessert, the two of them went to an all-you-can-eat sweets buffet. They joked and laughed about how often they're mistaken for a couple whenever they go out together. So much has happened, really, so much. Up until recently, our impressions of each other couldn't have been worse. But people make mistakes, and as long as they're willing to acknowledge them and take a step forward, life can turn out better than you'd ever imagine. Watching the smiles on Rachel and my family's faces, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd all come.